Hello, everyone. I'm Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Jim Teskes. Thank you for tuning in to Teskes Tidbits this evening. Just to give you an overview of what we'll be talking about. For tonight, we've kind of switched from September to October. We're into the early part of October right now. It's hard to believe we're 3/4 of the way through 2025. So we'll take a little look back at the month of September, some of the interesting numbers, some of the tidbits, if you will, of that. A little preview of the month of October, and take a slight dip, just kind of dip the toe in the water for the winter outlook. It won't be the official winter outlook here for central New York, Syracuse specifically. We won't officially do that on air until November 12th, but we'll look at one of the main factors that could be driving our weather this winter and what some of the numbers look like. So that's what you can expect here for tonight's episode. We thought we'd start out by taking a look at what went on as far as precipitation during the month of September. Kind of interesting as you take a look at the numbers as a whole. And you can see that we ended up below normal by a little bit more than 0.8 of an inch. It would have been much more than that, except for this one day, the 25th, when we had 1 2/3 inches, most of that actually falling in a couple of hours between, I think it was 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning on that particular day. You take that out, and we probably would have been, more than 2 inches below normal. The other highlight, of course, was this long stretch. It was a full 2 weeks. It was 15 days without measurable rain in Syracuse. So that's kind of the highlight as far as rainfall is concerned. And, we've been running deficits since June. So we're below normal, and we'll keep trending and looking at the drought numbers because of all of central New York under abnormally dry conditions as of the beginning of the month. We're coming to the end of the growing season, but, that'll still be at least a little bit of a concern going forward. So, they talk about weather, precipitation being a matter of location, and take a look at this. The monthly numbers across New York State, or at least upstate New York. I went a little bit too fast here. Let's see if I can go back and take a look at. Let's see. There we go. And you can see on this particular graphic the rainfall totals. And in particular, there's the Syracuse number. Binghamton not too far behind us. But look to the west. Buffalo had 1 1/3 inches. Rochester, which I think is pretty remarkable, they had 0.3 of an inch of rain. It was their second driest September on record, and it was probably somewhere in their top 5, maybe top 10 least rainfall months on record. And keep in mind, Rochester's records go back farther than Syracuse. Syracuse is picked up in 1902. I believe Rochester started in 1879. So it's that's almost 150 years. So pretty impressive totals there. So it's amazing how just a short little ride down the thruway can make such a huge difference in terms of rainfall. But that's the way things kind of play out sometimes with precipitation, the haves and the have-nots. So that's the precipitation side of the equation. And let's go over to temperature. You got a preview of that. As you take a look at the September highs as a whole, what kind of stands out first off is really not much extreme in terms of the highs. Yes, there was a patch of cooler weather early in the month where we had some highs only in the 60s, but that wasn't too cool. And then actually after the 8th, every day had temperatures at least 70 degrees or higher, and we ended up with 8 days where the temperature was 80 or better, which is on par with what we should have. That was not unusual. Warmest day was the 18th, where we were 82. Also on Thursday, the 4th, 82 degrees for the high temperature. What this doesn't show is the overnight lows, which in particular early in the month were cooler than normal. And that kind of brought our overall average down. But by the end of the month, we did pick up the pace. We ended up being a little bit less than a degree and a half below normal or above normal. So that makes it now, 7 out of 9 months have been above normal in terms of temperature. And it also continues a streak. This is one of these, unusual streaks. We've now had 12 straight months with above normal temperatures in the month of September. You have to go all the way back to September 2013, where we were 1.6 degrees below normal. So that's a pretty, impressive stretch. We know that, because of the change in the climate, we're more susceptible to warmer than normal months. And I looked over this time period, 11 to 12 years, and most of the months, averaged out with more above normal months, say for January or February, March, but it usually was more on, 7 were above normal, 5 were below normal, in a few cases, 9 above, 3 below. But only September had this, 12 straight. And as you look at this graph, take this into account. Our months right now are more likely to be above normal because of the change in the climate. So that's one obviously big factor. But also there is some variability from month to month. My guess is if you take out the change in the climate, a few of these months may have actually ended up below normal. And I kind of likened it, and I'm not the first one to say this, but I know climate scientists talk about, when you've changed the climate like we've had, it's kind of like you load the dice for warmer than normal months. So instead of a dice having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 6. So it's, if 6 is an above normal month, you've got a better chance of rolling 6s and getting an above normal month in a changing climate like this. But still, that's pretty impressive to have a full dozen Septembers now in a row with above normal temperatures. So that's kind of the interesting stat of the day. One other thing about September's numbers, and I just started looking at this a little bit more closely just because of the pattern that we were in September in particular. The winds were kind of lacking. I don't want to say they weren't there at all, but the winds were much lower than normally. And it doesn't seem that impressive when you show this, the average wind speed for the month of September was 4.8 miles per hour. The average wind speed for September is 6.8 miles per hour. But you do the math, and, that's 29% less wind. And, given the stagnant pattern that we were in during the month of September, we had that long stretch where we had no measurable rain, no real big extremes in terms of temperature. When you're not changing things that much, that's usually a sign that the jet stream is pretty far to the north, not bringing in strong systems that would normally kick up a lot of wind. So it kind of follows, the weather pattern that we saw during September being so tranquil that it would lead to less in the way of winds here in central New York. So those are the numbers for September. I'm going to take a look here a little bit at October and first off set up what's happening in terms of temperatures. First off, the average high on October 1st is 67. By the time you get to Halloween, 31 days later, the average high temperature has dropped to 54. So, we're losing 13 degrees in 1 month. Obviously, you're not going down in a straight line. There's ups and downs. But that just shows you the change that will be occurring during the month that is October. And that follows September. We start September with an average high of 78 and it drops to 67. So in a matter of 2 months, you're going from, essentially coming off the peak of summer with an average high of 78, and 2 months later, you're down to 54. Just, shows you how dramatic that change in temperature is. We're talking about cooler weather as well during the month. People start thinking maybe snow. And you know what? As far as chances for snow, there's measurable snow in Syracuse that occurs once every 3 years. The last time that we saw some measurable snow in October was 2023. So just 2 years ago, 0.2 of an inch on Halloween Day. So, it's not that unusual. I would guess over higher elevations, your odds are probably better than once every 3 years. By the way, the snowiest October on record occurred in 1988. We had 5.7 inches of snow. The earliest recorded snowfall in Syracuse history, that occurred on October 1st. 1946. I'm recording this on October 1st. I can tell you we did not have measurable snow. So that record will still stand for another year here in Syracuse. So that's a little bit of climatology. We know that temperatures will be warm initially this first week of October. And this chart shows the projection of temperatures for the entire month. This is courtesy of NOAA. And, it's saying greatest chance for above normal temperatures will stretch from the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, and right into the Northeast as well. I do believe that there will be some cooler than normal weather. The first signs of that will probably be just in time for the Columbus Day weekend, it looks like at this point. And keep in mind, we showed you those averages for temperatures, the end of the month, high temperature is 54. That means, upper 50s, low 60s is above normal by the time you get to the end of the month. So our bar gets lowered. It's not to say, we're going to have 70s to near 80 degree weather here all month just based on that map. It just means temperatures have the greatest chance of being above normal in areas including central New York. So above normal temperatures later in the month are not necessarily as great as what we'll see here in the beginning of the month, where there will probably be some 80-degree weather. So that's the first part of things. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about one of the factors that we are already looking at for our winter outlook, something that will probably play a big role in what happens weather-wise. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back here on Teskes Tidbits to talk a little bit about winter. Welcome back to Teskes Tidbits. I'm Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Jim Teskes. Thank you for tuning in tonight as we dig inside the numbers. We talked a little bit about September's numbers, and now time to focus a little bit on winter weather. And again, I'll preface by saying this is not the official Storm Team outlook yet at this point. We'll still be looking at some other data, and we'll unveil the official winter forecast on November 12th. That's a Wednesday, November 12th. So we're still about a month or so away from that. But there's at least some signs, there are some signals that are showing up that will likely help us in terms of how we're going to forecast for the winter. And one of the things we typically focus in on is what's going on in the Pacific. The water temperatures, surface water temperatures in the Pacific can give us some clues as to what's going to happen. And we like to focus in on what's happening near the equator, in particular the central and eastern Pacific. And we're getting into a setup that's a La Nina, which just means the temperatures of the ocean at the surface near the equator in the Pacific will be cooler than normal. You may have heard of El Nino, which is the opposite, warmer than normal waters there. But right now, the temperatures in the Pacific are cooler than normal. So we're going into the winter, it looks like, with below normal temperatures in the Pacific. And this is a graphic that shows the odds of whether there'll be an El Nino or La Nina or neither. And this also comes from NOAA, the Climate Prediction Center. That's it says CPC there near the top. And just to get your bearings straight, blue would be La Nina, the gray is neutral, and the red is El Nino. And those are the months: August, September, October, all the way over toward April, May, and June. And so here's the fall season, and you can see the odds for the La Nina increasing during the October, November, December, essentially the November time frame, 70% chance of seeing a La Nina. But the odds actually going through December, January, February, March, dropped to 30%, and the odds for the neutral conditions actually goes up. So this is going to be a case where the La Nina starts in the wintertime and then gradually dissipates. At least that's the forecast right now. That's something we'll key in on, kind of focus on winters perhaps that start off in La Nina and go back toward those neutral conditions. But we're also looking at the strength. And, the strength of La Ninas are measured by how cool the water is out in the equatorial Pacific. When the waters are not that much cooler than normal, it's a weak La Nina. And then it goes up to a moderate and then also a strong La Nina. And, with it looking to be, given that change to a neutral position during the winter, probably going to be a weak La Nina. We've run the numbers in terms of what weather is like for us in Syracuse, snowfall-wise, and there is certainly a tendency when we have a weak La Nina for us to then transition over to more snow in the wintertime. And the next graphic we're going to show you kind of backs that up. We're going to take a look specifically at the setup. First off, before we get those numbers, I almost forgot. The La Nina tends to give us a jet stream that looks like this. It sets up with a ridge of high pressure over the northern Pacific and then drops into the United States. That allows cooler than normal air over the plains, western Great Lakes, and at times even into the Northeast. And another thing that we're watching very closely, which I think is going to impact the strength of this ridge, is the fact that there's some very warm water in the northern Pacific, all the way from, I think Russia and Tokyo, or in Japan, I should say, all the way east. And they call it the blob. It's happened on several occasions where extremely warmer than normal waters. And that will tend to strengthen this ridge of high pressure. And if that happens, that certainly would lead to more cold weather here during the winter in central New York. So that's typically what you would see in a setup. That's what we're looking at. Now I want to show you what's going on in terms of snowfall. And I talked about, the different phases of the La Nina. And I looked back over the last 40 years. So this is going to be all the weak, moderate, strong La Ninas since the winter of 1983-84, which was a weak La Nina, by the way. And you could see when we have that weak La Nina, there tends to be more snow. It's a big difference compared to a moderate La Nina and even a strong La Nina. This would actually be a little bit above normal for us. Now, the sample size is much greater for the weak La Nina. We've had 8 of those, and as I specifically look at those 8, 7 out of the 8 had more than 100 inches of snow. We've only had one winter over the last 6 winters with more than 100 inches of snow. That was last winter. There was only 1 week La Nina where we had snowfall that was under 100 inches. It was 20, 22, 23, one of those, years where there wasn't much snow. It was only 65 inches of snow. But the majority do have snowfall over 100 inches, and in particular, 2001 ended up with 191 inches of snow, almost 192 inches, and that was our second snowiest winter on record. So, this is one thing we're going to look at. We also like to look at other things for the fall. One of the things that, helps us out is rainfall in October. There tends to be snowier winters after wet Octobers. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time that's the case. So we're still going through the numbers. We'll still look to, see if there's any clues setting up late in the fall season to see if that's going to impact our numbers as far as winter weather is concerned here in central New York. And again, we will have that winter outlook on Wednesday, November 12th here in Syracuse. As far as the other numbers I looked at, I could just mention this briefly. Temperatures on those 8-week La Nina years, 1, 2, 3, 4 had below normal temperatures. 2 out of the 8, or 3 out of the 8 had above normal. So it's kind of back and forth on that. So we're going to be talking more about that over the next month or so as we get ready for our winter weather outlook. Stay tuned over the next few weeks here on WSYR Plus. We are going to have more interviews about winter weather, some interesting guests coming up. Don't want to give it away at this point, but we'll be talking more about that. So thanks for tuning in to Teskes Tidbits. We will talk to you soon.